Autism is a developmental disorder that can affect how the brain processes information. People with autism have a spectrum of abilities and disabilities. Some are unable to speak or care for themselves, while others can live on their own and have unique skills like excellent memory or attention to detail. No matter where they are in the spectrum, many adults with autism have a difficult time finding a job. Even making it past our first interview can be challenging. But that may be starting to change. As we found out, more companies are discovering the potential of people with autism, and some are now actively recruiting for talent on the spectrum.
All right, and then just head on over here.
Doing a television interview can be nerve-wracking for anyone, but for people with autism, it's potentially overwhelming. The cameras, lights, microphones, not to mention having to shake hands with a stranger.
It's nice of you to be there.
But last winter, before the pandemic, 5 adults on the autism spectrum agreed to talk with us about their struggles finding work.
I was unemployed for 3 years. I just kept receiving one rejection after the other.
Eric Rolon has a bachelor's degree in sociology.
How many jobs do you think you applied for?
Countless. I can't even count. About hundreds.
How did that feel to get so many rejections?
Well, I felt useless. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with life.
Brian Evans and Philip Mitchell were diagnosed with autism as young children. Sarah Kleitch and Brennan Novak, not until high school.
How does being a person with autism make you different than a person who doesn't have autism? Do you see differences?
Oh yes, I do see differences from person to person. With me, for example, I'm good with numbers and I'm good with mathematics.
Differences in communication are pretty common from what I've seen, like especially with like nonverbal communication, like body language and stuff.
What would you like people to understand about autism?
Lack of or the ability to communicate doesn't equal intelligence.
Clearly they have talents and skills.
Dave Friedman hired Sarah and the 4 others at Autonomy Works, a tech firm he started in 2012 to proofread digital content and manage data for dozens of companies like Nike and Nissan. There are 32 adults on the spectrum here, now working from home due to COVID-19, including Friedman's 25-year-old son, Matt.
Let's try 700, see what we get.
Nothing beats sort of sitting in my office and looking over here and seeing Matt at work. And the job has really given him sort of a whole nother purpose in life.
Do you like the job?
Yeah, I like that it's a quiet office environment.
Do you remember getting your first paycheck?
June 22nd, 2015.
You remember the date? That's... Did you worry a lot about what would happen to Matt when he became an adult?
For a long time, we didn't. He's really talented with numbers, really good with detail. So we figured that there had to be jobs out there for him. What we found was horrifying. Like there are no jobs.
A child with autism reaching 18 or 21, and suddenly it's
a cliff.
People have talked about a cliff,
yeah.
Or graduating to their parents' couch.
What ends up happening is they transition from a structured school setting into their parents' house with really very few prospects. Back in 2011,
The idea for Autonomy Works came to Friedman when he was head of marketing at Sears. He oversaw hundreds of employees checking the accuracy of advertisements in newspapers.
And the thought occurred to me, Matt could do this. This appeals to exactly the kind of way that Matt thinks and processes information.
It's a lot of very small, detailed information.
Yeah, it seems like a small thing. It seems like 2124 versus 2924, but there's tens of thousands of dollars of costs that sit in that error.
Autonomy Works employees monitor more than 2,300 websites a month for accuracy and quality. Friedman says their extreme attention to detail has led to a 90% reduction in product and pricing errors, and they're so good at sustaining focus, productivity is up 30%.
I have a great memory. And so when I do a task once, I can usually produce it exactly the same way.
Do you get bored?
For me, I don't get bored at all doing our work.
Part of it is the repetition. I can get into like a rhythm with certain tasks.
You like the rhythm?
Yeah. If I was in a job that was constantly changing, it wouldn't fit me very well because like my mind would be all over the place.
Let's look over here and see which one.
Not all people with autism would be able to work in an office environment like this. The Centers for Disease Control estimates about a third of people on the spectrum have significant intellectual disabilities.
Autism is a spectrum. It impacts people in a wildly different array of ways, from people who are unable to feed themselves or care for themselves, all the way up to people where you would never even know that they were on the spectrum and can get through life without any sort of supports.
At Autonomy Works, employees can wear noise-canceling headphones and take breaks in a quiet room where lights are dimmed to reduce sensory overload. Friedman says the most important accommodation companies can make is to change the way they interview applicants on the spectrum.
For a person with autism, the first 15 or 30 seconds of an interaction are by far their worst. They're high anxiety about meeting a new person, trying to interpret interpersonal cues, trying to plan out a conversation to have with that person.
And those first 15 seconds, that's when the other person, a job interviewer, say, is making their first and lasting impression about something.
Exactly. Hiring managers just aren't taking the time to go past that first 30 seconds and understand the skills, the talents, and the capabilities that exist within those individuals.
There are complexities that are inherently inside of these very large data sets.
At the global accounting firm Ernst & Young, they've scrapped the traditional interview process for applicants with autism. They've replaced it with a series of problem-solving challenges.
And so if I can ask you all to come up.
Testing aptitude, creativity, and teamwork.
I think for this stuff you could put analysis.
In a demonstration last February in Chicago, before the pandemic required they work from home, 4 current Ernst & Young employees on the autism spectrum were given millions of lines of data to quickly analyze and explain how they'd present it to a client.
If we find that there are errors, we can loop back over to this step.
Ernst & Young has used this technique to hire dozens of employees with autism who work around the world in fields like artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and cybersecurity. Is this about corporate responsibility, doing the right thing, being altruistic?
Make no mistake about it, this is absolutely a business imperative, and it makes great sense from a business perspective.
Kelly Greer, Ernst & Young's U.S. chairwoman, says the employees they've hired have saved the company millions of dollars by looking at problems in a different way and creating algorithms to shortcut and automate processes.
That is one of the things every one of our clients is focused on right now. How do they use data differently to create competitive advantages or to stave off vulnerability? And it is a very, very rare skill set in high demand. There's still so many people on the spectrum that are underemployed or unemployed, and they've got this incredible talent that is going unused at the moment.
This is a place where we could bring autistic staff and interns.
Last year, Vanderbilt University opened the Frisch Center for Autism and Innovation, a groundbreaking research center where scientists and others are developing tools and technology to transform the workplace for people on the autism spectrum.
What subject did you most enjoy in school?
They're creating computer-simulated job interviews,
Straight ahead.
specially designed driving challenges, and a block design test to help a company assess a potential employee's visual problem-solving abilities.
So people have done research on this for a few
Maidali Kunda is a computer scientist at the Frisch Center.
So this is a wearable eye tracker. Right here and here are 2 little tiny cameras, and they're actually facing inward, and they're recording your eyes.
The infrared cameras detect where your pupils are pointing.
You can start as soon as I turn the page, so... Okay.
Dan Berger, a data scientist at the center who's on the autism spectrum, volunteered to take the block design test to compare his visual problem-solving abilities with mine.
Great.
For 10 minutes, he assembled a series of increasingly complex block patterns.
Can go?
Yes.
Next, it was my turn. Dan made it look easy. For me, it wasn't.
At this point, my head is hurting. Should it be hurting?
I completed the puzzles, but Dan did them faster and was more efficient. How can you tell? Look at the square on the right of your screen. Dan methodically placed the blocks left to right, line by line. And amazingly, he usually only had to look at the sample pattern once before placing a block.
What is it? Why am I not?
I wasn't organized at all. I placed blocks randomly and had to look back and forth 13 times at the sample pattern before figuring out how to place the last block.
My mind is a sieve, essentially. Like, I'm not holding on to any of that information, so I'm constantly having to refer back to the original, whereas Dan, he memorizes it.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So it's a completely different way of processing information or trying to solve problems.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Maidali Kunda hopes employers might use tests like this to more accurately assess the capabilities of people on the autism spectrum.
You know, you imagine like TSA baggage screening is something that's super visual, or when you're inspecting batteries coming off the line for quality control. So there's lots of different jobs that this is relevant for.
In the model, we put things like
Dan Berger's unique abilities caught the attention of Kayvon Stassen, an astrophysics professor at Vanderbilt. His son is on the autism spectrum, and Stassen helped start the Frisk Center.
Why did you want Dan here at the center?
I brought him on board with my astrophysics research group originally because we were dealing with these massive amounts of data from space telescopes, and I needed help from someone who had Dan's unique talents to help us look for patterns in data.
So one of the skills that you have is looking at large amounts of information?
I think my greatest skill is I see things differently from other people.
This is a picture of the Seven Sisters.
Dan's challenge was to make sense of data from NASA's Kepler telescope. His solution? He built an interactive software program called Filtergraph.
Using Dan's software tool, we were just able to slice and dice the data, spin it around in different ways until something visually popped.
This is a range.
What popped was a breakthrough in astrophysics. Dan's Filtergraph produced a new way of judging the size and age of stars based on how vigorously they flicker in the night sky.
Dan may be too modest to tell you, but he is the inventor of record of this platform, and NASA has licensed it.
NASA is using Filtergraph that you invented.
Yes.
I mean, the brilliance that, Dan, that you have, that's going to become increasingly important. There's only going to be more and more data coming down the road.
And I feel like people who can understand the data, that's going to be more important.
There's a lot of people who are unemployed who are on the spectrum. Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, gosh. I feel like there are a lot of strengths to being on the spectrum, and I think imagination is a huge key trait.
So that's the kind of opportunity that
We found about 30 large companies actively seeking employees on the autism spectrum, including Microsoft, JP Morgan, and Ford. But there are still so many people with autism who are unemployed, and the numbers are growing. In the next decade, researchers at Drexel University estimate as many as 1.1 million Americans with autism will turn 18. Back at Autonomy Works outside Chicago, Brian, Sarah, Brennan, Philip, and Eric told us they hope more companies will start to recognize the untapped potential of people on the spectrum.
What does having a job mean to you?
For me, having a job is important because it provides me with much needed structure in my life.
Having a job is important to me because otherwise I would become very financially dependent on my parent, asking them, can you buy me this? Can you buy me that?
It's just been nice to be able to go home and talk to my parents about what I did during the day.
They must be very proud of you.
Yeah. They always say they're not surprised, so.
In the weeks since Steve Jobs died, there's been an outpouring of gratitude from his fans for the way his inventions, like the iPad, changed their lives. Among the most passionate are parents of children with severe forms of autism, especially those who can't speak and appear hopelessly locked inside themselves. Those parents often say these kids understand more and know more than they're able to communicate. Well, now with the iPad and other tablet computers spreading through the autism community, some of those parents are finding out they were right. It turns out that autistic children show a real interest in the iPad with its easy touch and swipe screens. With specially designed applications or apps, these computers are helping them communicate and unlocking the isolation of people like 27-year-old Joshua Hood. Imagine spending your life having conversations like this.
P, L.
Having to poke out words on a laminated piece of paper, one letter at a time.
C, plastic.
It was so frustrating for Josh, his mother Nancy says he would often give up and retreat into himself. At family gatherings, he was sidelined because no one understood him. At school, he sat passively in class, unable to participate. When Josh was feeling bad or really needed something, the family resorted to charades.
So you'd be like, you know, can you spell it?
can you show me? And so he would
He'd act it out almost?
He would look around a room and he'd see if he could find something that sounded like it. It was
Just to tell you one little thing.
one thing that he wanted, yes.
How are you? But not anymore.
I want a drink.
For the past year, Josh has been using an Apple iPad as his voice. And he is, well, he's reborn.
What are we having to eat today, Josh?
I want bagel bacon, please.
Okay.
Now, when he goes to the local diner, he can order his breakfast himself. Josh's mom downloaded a special language app and added pictures, videos, and symbols that allow him to convey his feelings,
Happy.
what he wants,
Toys.
and what he watches on TV.
TV News 60 Minutes.
My first 60 Minutes interview on an iPad. I asked about his brother Jimmy.
And how old is Jimmy? Is he?
Keyboard. Numbers. 2, 6. Jimmy 26.
So he's 1 year younger than you are. Is he your best friend? Oh, does that mean you love him? Yeah.
Josh is typical of people with autism in that he rarely looks directly at me, he rocks, and he has obsessions. In his case, it's World War II.
Hogan's Heroes Season 6.
His therapist, Tammy Taylor, will never forget the first time she put the iPad into his hands. What had been bottled up inside him began to pour out.
It just blew me away that he could actually tell me his brother had a goatee and was bald.
He's completely communicating.
Absolutely. He's part of the community. I mean, communication is the essence of being human, and here he is communicating fully now.
Totally.
The language app that Josh uses is called Proloquo to Go.
Josh's Spaces. My Places. Work.
But there are other apps created specifically for autistic people, like Autism Express, to help children identify emotions. And another called Look in My Eyes to practice eye contact.
How do you feel about being on TV? Can you show me on there?
Categories. Feelings. Happy. Joshua. Happy.
Tell me what's happening inside of you as your son starts to tell you what he's been thinking. He's probably been trying to tell you for 27 years.
Mind-boggling, to tell you the truth. I always had said when he was younger, it was like, you know, he was a computer and I was computer illiterate, and I didn't know how to press the right keys. Sorry, to get him to communicate. It was just, you know, that was the hard part, is you knew there was more in there and you didn't know how to get it out.
Touchscreen computers help Josh communicate. Can they do the same for these children at the Beverly School in Toronto, Canada, where half the students are severely autistic and more impaired than Josh?
You can show me.
The day we were there, kindergarten teacher Sabrina Morley struggled to figure out why 7-year-old Nathan was so upset.
Students don't have a way to communicate with me. They don't have a way to tell me how they're feeling, what they want, what they need, what's happened to them before they've come to school.
It's frustrating for you. What about for them?
It can be very frustrating.
Oh, look, the iPad's here.
For the past year, Maury and her fellow teachers Ian Stewart and Stacy Carroll have been involved in the first study to find out just how effective the iPad is with their students.
Has the iPad made any difference, Stacy?
The iPad has made a huge difference. There's something about using the iPad that draws the students in. They're engaged with it in a way that we don't see with other toys or puzzles or teaching tools.
The study has found that it improves the children's willingness to socialize, something autistic kids have trouble with, and it enhances their attention spans.
Can you look at the numbers, Jennifer?
In this video recorded by the school, Stacy's trying to get little Jennifer to focus on learning to count, using the old paper method.
She's not paying attention right now.
No, she's not looking at it.
But what a difference with the iPad.
1, 2, 3,
Good looking.
5.
Oh, that's wonderful. Look at her.
She's completely engrossed.
Totally. I hear that autistic children often prefer machines to having an interaction with a human being. Is that what we're seeing?
What we're thinking is that the device is constant. So the voice is constant, the pacing is constant, it waits. I might not wait as long.
You're unpredictable.
Right.
And they like order and control.
Absolutely.
But the teachers are finding that, as with autism in general, there's a range of ability when it comes to benefiting from the iPad.
When he likes something, he lights up.
I sat down with Sabrina and Nathan.
Ready? Letters. There you go.
As I watched, he repeatedly ignored her requests.
You choose a letter.
And she stepped in again and again to guide his hand. I wondered just how much he was learning on the iPad.
Which letter would you like to look at? And sometimes I have to hold my hand over it because otherwise he will just go in and out of programs.
What I found is that the device, the iPad, isn't for everyone. It's not for all my students. But the ones who are engaged by it, it's really, it's amazing. Do you want to do some work? No. Do you want to do some work? No?
It was thought that 10-year-old Nuno, who doesn't talk, had the IQ and attention span of a toddler.
Touch the one that is a healthy snack.
It was a nice snack. Good snack.
Awesome.
So when Ian tested him with a new vocabulary app, he was surprised by how much he knew.
Where is the wind chime? Great job. Touch the soldier. Yeah! Super.
Did you know he knew all those words?
No, absolutely not.
You had no idea?
No idea. No idea the extent of his vocabulary.
Find the saxophone. Yeah! You did it.
Saxophone. How did he know a saxophone, right?
And we've just recently found out that he has quite a love of classical music and opera, so he's
He has love of opera?
yes, he does.
And you didn't know it?
Didn't know it, yeah.
Did that come through the iPad?
It came through exploring music selections on the iPad. As a reward, sometimes we let him watch some videos in class, some Pavarotti or some arias, and he likes conductors, he likes symphonies.
You're discovering that there's more inside these children's heads than you realized.
And that's something in a way I feel like we've known, but this is giving us a tool to really show us and prove that there is more happening.
Figuring out why so many autistic people are unable to speak, as many as 30% of them, is the subject of a major new research study at the University of Pittsburgh.
We don't have a biological marker for autism in most cases at the moment.
Neuroscientist Dr. Walter Schneider is investigating whether the language problems in autism are caused by a disruption in the brain's connective circuits.
What we're going to do now is the motor mapper.
He invited Temple Grandin, the renowned professor of animal science and author of 5 books on autism, to have her brain scanned as his first subject.
Okay, Temple, the noise is going to start. You doing all right? I'm okay.
Grandin has Asperger's, a high-functioning form of autism, but she had trouble learning to speak.
My speech started coming in around, 3.5, a few stressed words at a time. Like I'd say, bah, for ball.
To analyze Grandin's brain, Schneider used a new technique he developed called high-definition fiber tracking that reveals the interior wiring in fine detail.
This is a normal brain.
This is a normal brain.
First, he showed us the fibers that make up the language circuit in a normal brain, a streamlined bundle with off-ramps at the top. But what about in a brain with autism, like Temple Grandin's?
But you're going to show us Temple's brain?
Yes, we're going to show the inside of Temple's brain.
What I saw floored me.
What did you think when you saw that? That is Temple, that is that. That is that?
That is this section and how it projects out.
But that's dramatic.
That's dramatic.
Schneider thinks this dramatic disorganization of the wiring may explain the language impairments seen in autism, but he won't know for sure until he scans more people. He hopes, among other things, that one day a brain scan will be able to diagnose autism early and tell parents if their child will ever speak.
So he's affectionate.
He's very, very affectionate.
Meantime, parents like Amanda Williams, Nathan's mother, are latching onto the iPad, marveling at how the device is opening windows into their children's minds, even if the windows are open only a crack.
I can't express to you enough like how amazing it is to watch him take his little finger and go like that in a controlled way. I think the thing that made us cry was when he flipped through it and then he saw the tiger. And then he went, oh, I gotta go back. And went boom. And he looked at us with this smile on his face and he's like, I did it.
And it's such a tiny little thing. For him, it's huge, right?
It's huge. It's huge.
Where do you see the iPad taking him? What's the next step and the next step?
We don't know what the future holds for him in terms of speech. We like to think and we still hope that one day speech will come in whatever form. But if it doesn't, and if it's not perfect,
his voice.
This will be his voice.
There are not many shows on television that deserve to be called true American institutions, but one of them is surely Sesame Street. It's been on the air now for almost 50 years. When Sesame Street began in 1969, it was considered an experiment. The question, could television be used to educate young children? Well, research proved the answer to be yes, and the nonprofit Children's Television Workshop, now called Sesame Workshop, that created the show, has been refining and expanding that mission ever since. Everything from ABCs and 1-2-3s to race and even death. In a few weeks, Sesame Street, which now airs on HBO, as well as its longtime home on PBS, will take on its latest challenge, introducing a new kid on the street, a Muppet named Julia, who has autism. For many of us, these opening notes are a trip down memory lane.
Sally, you've never seen a street like Sesame Street. Everything happens here.
To a street we watched as kids, with our kids, or both.
You know that you have a banana in your ear?
What was that, Bert?
With Muppet characters as known and beloved as any human TV star.
Will you just take that banana out of your ear?
I'm sorry, you'll have to speak a little louder, Bert. I can't hear you. I have a banana in my ear.
Today, almost half a century later, Sesame Street is shot on a soundstage in Astoria, Queens, with one of the cameramen who filmed the first episode still on the job.
One more rehearsal in real time.
The Sesame Street set is a vibrant, upbeat place.
Here we go.
With puppeteers on rolling stools down below. And the furry and feathery creatures they bring to life in the sometimes crowded space above.
It was a little awkward.
Well, I'm sorry.
The puppeteers figure out how to position their Muppet by watching the scene on monitors.
Here we go.
The day we visited, they were filming the debut of the new Muppet character, Julia, who has autism. The story begins with Julia's friends, Muppets Elmo and Abby Cadabby, introducing her to Big Bird.
Hi, Julia. I'm Big Bird. Nice to meet you. Oh, Julia?
But Big Bird is confused when Julia doesn't respond.
I think the big discussion right at the start was, how do we do this? How do we talk about autism?
Christine Ferraro has been a writer at Sesame Street for 25 years, during which time the frequency of autism diagnoses has multiplied. The chances of a little kid, 2, 3, 4 years old, having some kind of a relationship with another kid with autism is pretty high.
Exactly, especially once they hit school age, because they'll be in their classrooms.
Julia, you're so creative.
But how to portray autism?
It's tricky because autism is not one thing, because it is different for every single person who has autism. There's an expression that goes, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Sesame Street has always based its characters and content on extensive research. They regularly bring in educators and child psychologists. In the case of Julia, they also worked with autism organizations to decide which characteristics she should have and how best to normalize autism for all children.
So that when they encounter them in their real life, it's familiar. And they see that these can be their friends too.
Hi, Miss Lesley. You look very shiny and beautiful today.
Well, so do you.
During a break in the filming, Julia and her friends did for us what they're hoping to do for millions with this episode.
And hi, Julia.
Help the audience understand when a child with autism doesn't react the way one might expect.
Big Bird, when you first met Julia, she didn't answer you either.
Yeah, that's right. And I thought that maybe she didn't like me.
Yeah, but you know, we had to explain to Big Bird that Julia likes Big Bird. It's just that Julia has autism. So sometimes it takes her a little longer to do things.
You're explaining her because you've come to understand her so well.
Well, we're pretty good at understanding people. We live with a grouch.
What do you want?
Sesame Street has been around so long now that it's hard to remember a time before children's television was educational. But Sesame Street's creator, Joan Gans Cooney, remembers it well.
It was just nutty cartoons with no purpose at all. I mean, I would watch them and just be appalled.
As you're talking, I'm seeing a cat slam against a wall, be reduced to nothing, slide down, and come back to life.
Yes, that was commercial television.
Gans Cooney, then a public television producer, was asked by the Carnegie Corporation to study whether television could be something different.
The question being, do you think television could teach children?
Ironically, she says the answer was right in front of her and everyone else in beer.
They were singing beer commercials, children were. Well, so obviously they'd learned the jingle. So if a commercial could teach beer, couldn't it teach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10?
1, 2, 3, 4.
And that became the model Gans Cooney spelled out in her 50-page report proposing what would become Sesame Street.
And we did. We created little commercials.
Boys and girls, have you met? 26 letters called the alphabet.
The new show had a particular target, low-income children who are arriving at school less prepared than their middle-class peers. So Gans Cooney deliberately made the set a gritty New York street urban kids could relate to, with an interracial cast that got the show banned early on in Mississippi. Nationwide, though, it was a hit. Kids and parents loved Jim Henson's Muppets.
8, 9, 10.
10.
11.
11.
Oh, you got pretty eyes.
So do you.
And testing showed kids who watched were learning.
Got the letter M.
Sometimes the lessons were about real life.
I'm your neighborhood friend, Mr. Hooper.
As when the actor who played beloved shopkeeper Mr. Hooper passed away, and the show decided to address the subject of death head on.
Ta-da!
Oh, look at that one.
I can't wait till he sees it. Say, where is he?
You could have changed actors.
Yes, but we decided Sesame Street had always dealt with the real, and it was real. So we decided not to just replace him and called the man Mr. Hooper and hoped they didn't notice.
Don't you remember we told you Mr. Hooper died? He's dead.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Well, I'll give it to him when he comes back.
Big Bird, when people die, they don't come back.
Ever?
Over the years, Sesame Street did segments about other challenging subjects, like skin color, disabilities, and prejudice.
In my neighborhood, birds only play with birds, so I'm not playing with a snuffleupagus.
Oh, that hurts my feelings.
Little children.
Less well known is a branch of Sesame, separate from the TV show, that creates online videos like this and other materials. They're called social impact initiatives, and they're targeted at specific communities of kids.
This one is where I live with my mommy, and this one is where I live with my daddy.
Like children of divorce, kids from military families,
It's like a robot hand.
and the nearly 3 million kids with a parent incarcerated.
My dad's in jail.
The focus on autism began as one of these social impact projects,
Sesame Street and Autism,
with videos.
My son Louis is 6 and he has autism.
And an online animated storybook about a little girl named Julia. The initiative was so well received, Sesame decided to bring Julia to the broadcast, which meant designing a new Muppet.
And this is our eye drawer.
Look at that. This is where Muppets are born, at the Jim Henson Workshop, at the workstation of master puppet creator Raleigh Cruson.
The male eyes have no eyelashes, and the female eyes have eyelashes.
Oh, because Julia has autism, were there special challenges in building her?
Yes, actually, because when she gets upset, she flaps her hands. So she has two separate sets of arms. She has a set of arms that does this, and then she has a set of arms when she's fine and okay. So they would switch on set.
High five, Julia.
And of course, every Muppet needs a puppeteer. But not every puppeteer has the connection Stacy Gordon does to the role. Gordon is the mother of a son with autism.
Put it on the top of the paper towel.
She traveled all the way from Phoenix to audition for the part. The idea that there will be a child with autism on Sesame Street, tell me what that means to you.
It means that our kids are important enough to be seen in society. Having Julia on the show and seeing all of the characters treat her with compassion.
And like her.
And like her.
That's big.
Yeah, it's huge.
Gordon told us she channeled her son's experiences for a tough scene where Julia's heightened sensitivity to noise triggers a meltdown.
Noise? The sirens are bothering you?
It's important for kids without autism to see what autism can look like. Had my son's friends been exposed to his behaviors through something that they'd seen on TV, before they experienced them in the classroom, they might not have been frightened. They might not have been worried when he cried. They would have known that he plays in a different way and that that's okay.
He didn't have that.
He didn't have that.
But maybe kids from now on will.
And that's the beautiful thing.
You want to play now, Julia? Play.
Also beautiful to Gordon, the message of inclusion at the heart of one of the episode's most memorable scenes.
They decide to play tag together. But Julia's so excited, she's jumping up and down. That's the thing that can be typical of some kids with autism.
Oh, Julia, you're bouncing like a rubber ball. Boing, boing.
And then it turns into a game where they're all jumping like her. So it was a very easy way to show that with a very slight accommodation, they can meet her where she is.
Boing, boing.
And get something out of it themselves.
Boing, this is fun, Julia. Hey, it's a whole new game. It's boing tag. Boing, 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 boing. Now I'm it.
You know, I think I'd like to be a friend of Julia, too.
She is going to be a recurring character.
That's the hope.
And will
That's the
she
goal.
become a major character?
We'll see.
You'd like to have her become a major character, I can see.
I would love her to be. I would love her to be not Julia, the kid on Sesame Street who has autism. I would like her to be just Julia.
Yeah, we really like Julia. She's really special to us, Miss Lesley.
Julia, are you having fun with your new friends?
Fun, 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 fun.
That's a yes.
Child prodigies have long been a source of great fascination. We wonder, how can so much talent reside in such a young body, so much genius? In a moment, you'll meet Jake, a 13-year-old math and science prodigy who's confident he may one day challenge some of the established theories of physics. The source of that talent and that confidence comes from our most remarkable organ, the one we understand least, the brain. What is it about Jake Barnett that had him taking college courses at age 8 and getting A's, and by 12, doing paid scientific research. And today, at age 13, an honors college sophomore lecturing the crowd at his university science symposium.
And do any of you guys want my resume at all?
The untied shoelaces reveal either your average teenager or the first telltale signs of the absent-minded professor, or both.
Let's look at the system of points.
Surrounded by researchers twice his age, Jake is presenting his summer physics research project on PT symmetric lattice systems.
This has implications in fiber optics, electromagnetic signals, anything that requires like a light going through a cable. Got it?
Every number or math problem I ever hear, I have permanently remembered.
You just never forget. They never,
never
slip
forget.
out the back door of your brain.
No.
Is it fun for you to do it? I mean, do you get a kick out of it?
Yeah.
For Jake, fun is reciting from memory the infinite series of numbers known as pi.
3.141592653589793238462643383279502.
Jake memorized more than 200 of pi's numbers in an afternoon.
9749445923070.
And he did it just to test himself.
You want me to go backwards from there?
Well, sure.
32397985356295141.3.
Bravo. He's not just parroting a textbook, he understands and analyzes the logic of higher mathematics. He can visualize and solve complex problems by using what he calls the fourth dimension. Just exactly what is the fourth dimension?
It's hard to describe in terms of the typical 3 because it's tangent to all the other ones. I'd be able to describe it if I had like a whiteboard and like 30 minutes to describe it. It takes a while. It's the fourth dimension. What do you expect?
The numbers appear to him as shapes that he says just build on one another.
So this, for example, is 3 cubed or 27. And then if I want to do 54, I just stack another one onto it.
He says his mind is constantly buzzing with new physics problems and theories. When he runs out of wall space, he moves on to windows. Remembering things so precisely, does that ever become a burden to you?
No, not at all.
No sense of overload?
I remember math and numbers. I don't remember other things. For example, if someone asks me where something is in the house, I tell them I don't know.
The oldest of 4 kids, Jake lives with his family in the suburbs of Indianapolis.
These are my periodic table. It's got all my elements.
He used the money he made from his summer research project, $3,200, to turn his bedroom into a science lab.
Copernicus was the most recently named element.
For as long as he can remember, he's been fascinated by the mysteries of space.
Saturn is my favorite planet, not due to the rings, but due to some of its moons.
Any ambition to be an astronaut?
Not an astronaut. That's like too dangerous. I'm going to be the guy controlling the astronauts. If anyone's an astronaut, it's going to be my brother.
All work and only occasional play does not make Jake a dull boy. What do you do for fun?
When it isn't anything academic?
No, I mean beyond the academics.
Does looking up space articles online count? Pi a cubed divided.
He has a full scholarship at the joint Indiana University-Purdue campus in Indianapolis, where he is an honors student in math and physics. He may not be the tallest student on campus, but is surely among the brightest. He regularly gets the highest grades in his classes.
What happens if you have C sub n, where it's proportional to n?
Jake's been auditing classes here since the ripe old age of 8, when it became obvious to his parents that 3rd grade was not going to be enough for him. What did your fellow students make of you?
Everyone was thinking that Mom was taking the class and she couldn't find a babysitter.
The students thought I was the student.
His parents, Christine and Michael Barnett, expected their son would quietly listen and learn. But even they were shocked when Jake jumped right into scientific discussions.
The professor would ask questions and Jake was answering them. And then he took the final at the end and got an A on it. And suddenly the people at the university took notice of that and eventually invited him to attend the university.
It's pretty shocking when an 8-year-old aces a university astronomy course. Weren't you impressed?
I guess I was impressed. I was just doing what I like to do.
No one could have predicted that Jake would even make it to college. Just before his second birthday, he began to regress, stopped speaking and making eye contact. After consulting with several doctors, the diagnosis was autism.
We went through speech therapy, physical therapy, developmental therapy, occupational therapy. A therapist came to the home.
He was going further and further from our world into a world of his own. And I really was just baffled at how we were going to get him back out of that world.
And how did you get him back out of that world?
We realized that Jacob was not happy unless he was doing something he loved.
Which even as a 3-year-old was math and science. His parents say the more he focused on the subjects he loved, the more he began to communicate.
You could just see him just relax. You could just see him feel like, thank goodness we're not working on something that I can't do today.
And how long did it take for him to, as you say, come back?
By the time he was kindergarten age, 5, 6, he was still behind as far as speaking with others and socializing with others. But he was also light years ahead of everybody else. He was coming home asking us, when am I going to learn something at school today? I want to learn algebra.
It was trying to keep Jake challenged that led to a kind of double life. Elementary school by day and sitting in on college courses in the evening. By 5th grade, he dropped out of public school, and just to demonstrate that he was ready for college, he taught himself all of high school math in just 2 weeks. He was 10 years old.
That was the most determined thing I've ever seen anybody do. He had to sit in a calculus class to prove to the university that he could sit still. And Jacob was like, I'm going to participate in that class discussion. So if I need to learn Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, trig, that's what I'm going to do. And he took a stack of books and he sat down and he just
Went and taught himself all of it in 2 weeks.
Not only that, he finished the entire state of Indiana curriculum for grades 6 to 12 in little over a year. The Barnetts, who've started a center for autistic kids called Jacob's Place, say that many of Jake's symptoms of autism have disappeared.
There are certain traits that are still there, and if you really, really knew what you were looking for, you could dig them out. But otherwise, I got a 10-year-old kid at that point in time that just happens to be doing next level work and no one knew anything different.
Your parents told us that you're very proud of your autism.
That, I believe, is the reason why I am in college and I am so successful. It is the rise as to my love for math and science and astronomy, and it's the reason why I care. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten this far.
Joanne Ruthsatz, a psychology professor at Ohio State, has been studying child prodigies for the last 13 years. She believes there's a link between autism and prodigies.
We know that child prodigies are having autistic relatives at a very high clip, and some of them have autism themselves.
She believes that what sets a prodigy with autism apart from other children with the condition is the prodigy's genes have been modified so that the genius emerges without many of the severe disabilities associated with autism.
In the general population of autism, 10% will have an autistic savant skill where they're exceptional at something. And they've only got that piece displaying itself.
She says for prodigies, be it in math, music, or art, the key to the extraordinary talent is extraordinary memory.
They all share this incredible memory, each and every one of them.
In Jake's case, he's 13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
What's remarkable is not just this memory, but his vocabulary is so adult.
Of course, they speak like adults. They've picked up so much information along the way so early in their life and continue to do so.
She says a talent like Jake's is about 1 in 10 million.
Jake's extraordinary. He's picking up information at a rate that none of us could even imagine doing it.
She's tested Jake and says he literally aces every intelligence and memory test.
Imagine if everything you saw you could remember. Every word you heard, you could recall that. And then you could integrate that information and come up with new ideas. That's what he's doing.
Kentucky, New Mexico,
A demonstration.
Nevada,
Dr. Ruthsatz named 28
Florida,
states in random order.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
No surprise, he
North
was able to
Dakota,
do it forwards
Washington,
and backwards in sequence with
Missouri,
ease. And when asked again 3 months later, you still remember them?
Yes, I do.
In the same order?
Mm-hmm. And I can still go backwards.
And backwards? Give me 5 or 10.
Kentucky, New Mexico, Nevada, Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Dakota, Washington, Missouri, Texas, Utah, Colorado.
While some may dismiss Jake's talent as simply a gift of remarkable memory, his physics professor says the boy is much more than a human calculator. Is it just great memory or something else?
It is definitely something else. The great memory does help him, of course, because once he reads something, he remembers it. But what is more important is that he has the drive to learn more. He definitely stands out as a powerhouse of raw talent.
Professor Yogesh Joglekar oversaw Jake's research project. Their work was published in Physical Review A. Jake is the youngest person to be published in that prestigious physics journal.
The whole randomness thing, that's like completely against all of physics.
He plans to continue his research, building on Einstein's theory of relativity. His parents say he takes on these challenges with an easy grace.
He has his own little tight-knit group of friends that he hangs out with, he studies with. He leads study groups. I have college-age girls calling the house wanting to know if Jake is available to study during finals. When I go to campus with him, it's like I'm walking around with Elvis.
So far, the king seems to keep his celebrity status in check, more or less.
Practically everyone knows who I am.
Are you a star on this campus?
Big man on campus. I just figured it out.
But the little big man says he enjoys nothing more than using his talent to help fellow classmates see the beauty he sees in the numbers.
Thanks, Jake.
You're welcome. I kind of want to try to use that to end the whole math phobia thing.
Because so many people like me and millions of others are scared of math, are scared of science, correct? Why is that so funny? You almost can't understand how anyone could be.
Exactly, yeah.
Jake is writing a book to help us overcome our fear of math, and he's on track to graduate at age 14, when he hopes to begin his PhD studies.